Welcome back to Al-Asad. My name's Issa. This is Elliot. We're in Minneapolis, and Elliot has a whole collection of lovely period antique weapons that he's gonna sit here and talk to us about. So I guess we can start with
So,
number one.
yeah, start with the. Oh, wait, I should get it. Sorry. Still, okay, so starting off with the most non-exotic one when it comes to geography. This is a European. It's not thought to be a European experimental sword. I call it a hook saber. It doesn't really have an official name. Um, my thought is because this is the only part that actually has an edge on it, believe it or not. My thought, and I think Issa, you came to this conclusion as well. The idea is it sort of replicates shamshir cut or any other kind of saber cut.
Yeah, to me, I think, if you were to strike with it, it seems like this would be where you would hit the point of percussion, and then as you drew through, it would slice on this part here.
Yep. Yeah. There's a total of 5 of these that are known. In regards to just pictures of them being online, there of course could be more just in private collections that have been digitized or whatever. Um, but yeah, only 5 known to exist. They all have slightly different guards and hilt designs. There's one where it's actually curved, like the entire thing is curved, not just the end bit. Um, I could send you some images to overlay, I guess, yeah, sure, of those examples. But yeah, that's the hook saber is my term for it.
What when was it used?
So it's thought to be Napoleonic period, so early 19th century, late 18th.
Vicious weapon.
Yeah, in theory.
Yeah.
Also worth noting that this section here is the only part that's actually tempered. So if you were to bend this, and I won't say how I know this, but if you were to bend this, it would stay bent. It doesn't flex back.
Oh, okay.
It's relatively thin, so you can still, hit it like that and vibrate. Um, but yeah, I think you'd have to make a modern spring steel version. Um, Definitely not gonna do any cut testing with this,
Yeah.
of course. I mean, it's an antique, but still, there's a good chance of just bending the entire thing.
It's pretty awesome though.
Yeah. Then all the rest of this is Indian, so that's just the one European thing. Yeah, Putta, gauntlet sword. Um, the native pronunciation of it is Putta, by the way. It's written with 2 T's, so you sort of emphasize that. Yeah. And it's the first vowel is short. It's a short A. Just something worth noting, because some people say Pata, things like that. It's a sort of a Western version. This is not the prettiest Putta. It is with an authentic gauntlet, so that's old. This blade, however, I might be able to see. The end of the languette here is really messed up, and it's likely been rehilted at least once for this. And the blade on it is very flexible and very blunt, and so this is likely a training version, like a period, antique training version. And we were just sparring with it.
Yeah,
it was fun.
So, but the ones that were actually used had a stiffer blade.
Yeah, they were stiffer. They were fuller usually. And I mean, there was some flex to them, of course, just because of the cross section.
Yeah.
And obviously, if you're using it on horseback or something, you wouldn't want to be super stiff. But I mean, otherwise, they were regular sword blades, basically.
Yeah, what's interesting. We just were messing around with it and trying to see how it could possibly be used in a sparring situation. And it was interesting because it seems like you would want to keep distance, and
it was very tempting to just thrust into gaps, which there aren't any accounts of, but especially with a stiffer blade, there's no reason why you couldn't in practice.
But unless though all the movements are like you were saying, you had the idea of a clock.
Yeah.
So if all the movements are like that, then there wouldn't really be no thrusting.
Yeah, you would lock into the place and then just cut sort of from there.
Yeah. Fascinating. Yeah, that one's pretty good. What's interesting too is my hand doesn't fit in there,
Yeah.
but his does.
Yeah,
so-
I'm a fully grown male, but yeah, I can fit my hand into all of these. So some people will say that like Indians have like really small hands. I think it's just a bone structure kind of thing. It's not small; it's just thin.
Interesting.
So I'm thin. We have some guitars.
Yeah,
And
this one's pretty cool looking.
yeah. So this one, probably won't be able to see it, but there's like different elements of the guard here has been brazed together. So it's more of an assemblage, I think, than necessarily like all in one piece originally.
Yeah.
Like the grips would be riveted through the sidebars here, and then they're brazed onto the blade. You can see the brass.
Yeah.
This is likely Dakkini, like Central Indian. There are a good number of these surviving in a museum in Hyderabad. And so I think it's a Hyderabadi example, or a Hyderabadi like type was developed there. 18th century, I should say this one. So yeah, that one's early 19th century. This one, probably 17th or 18th century on the guard, and then the blade is maybe more like 19th century. This one is, though, probably just like completely 18th century. So yeah, nothing super old so far.
Yeah. This one I think was cool because it has like this kind of claw like motion, so it's interesting if you're thinking about it like thrusting or something, but it has like a hook to it as well.
Yeah.
So I would imagine that you would, and you can see even this is small in my hand. If you were holding it, the hook would be down because that's like kind of like a kanjar.
Yeah,
stuff,
sort
and
of.
it makes more sense that way than this way, I guess. I don't know.
No, I think it depends. I mean, either way, you'd have to arc your thrust a little bit, anyways. I think in practice it wouldn't necessarily matter a whole lot, just because if it's got a good point on it, it'll just kind of. But yeah, very nice thick blade.
Yeah, it is. That one's good. And like, think too, like this. If we're looking at how Frank and I were doing the other stuff the other day, for going through mail, this might be like punches right through the rings, as opposed to like this other one.
Yeah, this one has a much thinner point, and there are plenty of examples of guitars with more normal blades that are thicker. The thing is, this one's 18th century. This one is solidly 19th, though. It could, have been owned by like someone that actually needed a guitar, but it's also equally as possible that it's just like a tourist kind of thing.
Yeah.
Because by the 19th century, Britain had colonized the entire subcontinent, more or less, with the exception of like the Punjab and stuff. Though they still did that in the 19th century. But so because of that, the whole ton of like weapons bans and stuff, and weapon making bans, and so most things that were made in the 19th century aren't like, battle ready per se. They might be made with that level of quality, but they're not really intended at that point to be like combat weapons.
Yeah.
You'll see a lot of like dealers that'll be really proud about their like super Kafgari like decorated 19th century examples, as if they're like some like high-ranking generals kind of weapon, but it's like most of the things, whether you like it or not, most of them were kind of made just for colonial powers interests.
And this has like
this one does have silver Kafgari in it.
Nice.
Relatively simple. But yeah, and this, incidentally, this one is also probably Dakkini, from the Dakkan region. One of the main identifiers of that is just that the sidebars here are slightly concave.
Oh, wow.
That you can see it quite a bit more on this
example.
Yeah. But I mean, overall, like, it's pretty much the basic form of a guitar in general, which is one of the reasons why I have it.
Yeah, it's nice.
It's pointy. This guy, we didn't really experiment much with.
No, we didn't. Yeah.
So this is pretty much more or less your typical like South Indian guitar.
Yeah.
This one's from around about Mysore or southern Karnataka. The blade on this, some people might see it or might recognize the blade shape as being like a broken or repurposed sword blade.
Yeah.
The thing is, though, when I first got it, I've since like cleaned it a bit. It was etched, and there was a Damascus pattern on it, like pattern welded. steel. And to my knowledge, those kind of blades weren't like imported into India, and so this is most likely like a completely domestically made blade. A lot of people like really prize, the repurposed sword blades, but this one was probably made for the shape. Other than that, though, it's got like a really nice geometric handle. The pointed grips here are thought to be more Mughal influence, and so this one, the Mysorean Sultanate, they're an Islamic Sultanate, and so they were partially inspired by the Mughals, and so this is an example of that. In addition to, I just think it has like really nice, clean lines.
Yeah, this one is a nice one. And we were, when Frank and I were together, he has the one, remember I said the sparring one? A steel sparring one that has a blade like this. So it was a prototype. Hopefully we're going to get a bunch of source that we can have steel ones that are in this type of shape that we can mess around with for sparring too. It has a good flex and everything on the blade.
Yeah, and in theory, like a longer blade guitar like this, you could do more actual like blade work and binding and stuff like that. This is an actual example of a hooded guitar, or bar jamdadu is like the one native term we know they might have used. It's sort of one of those terms that was recorded in the 19th century that may or may not be accurate. No idea like what language or what like people group would use the term, but it's just one floating around out there.
Nice.
Bara jamdadu, bara meaning big, and jamdadu being a version of a guitar, basically.
Oh, wow.
This one, so the hooded guitar was most famously used by the Vijayanagar Empire down in South India. It's where it developed there, basically. And the Vijayanagars were, well, they're Hindu, they're late medieval era. However, the Marathas later came to favor them, and so they actually did produce them all the way up into the 18th century.
Oh, wow.
So they span all the way from like the late medieval period to the 18th century. And this example likely is 18th century, just based on the craftsmanship. A lot of the earlier Vijayanagar era ones have like way more intricate details and things like that.
Why would you think, or do you know, why the hood was developed as opposed to the
Probably as a part of like kind of the idea of turning what was just a dagger into a short sword and later a full-size sword. From like the 10th to the 12th centuries, we have these carvings of people using sort of things that are in between a hooded guitar and a pada and like a regular guitar. So there seems to have been this whole push, basically, overall between different empires that are competing.
Oh, nice.
To just develop like the guitar into a full weapon, which they succeeded at. And this is one of the forms that like stuck around. Basically.
Yeah, it's awesome.
And it is unique for having these really bulbous.
Yeah, that is cool. I wonder if that helps. Obviously, not my hand once again, but if that helps like lock into the palm,
Yeah, it's a similar thing with the really spiky crossbars. It divides the hand into two bits, and that, while less aggressive, it does basically the same thing.
Yeah, interesting too. Yeah, and actually, that was the last guitar, but like, can you point out how to hold it? Because like how we were talking.
Yeah. Well, so the one thing that we were talking about was just might be better without the glove. It aligns with your knuckles here, so you want the blade to be in line like that, so you can do a good chopping motion, and of course, it also works just as well for a punch or a thrust. And it's the basic thing. Other than that, I mean, it's just a fist grip, really.
Yeah, and it seems like I have bigger hands, my knuckles fit in there easier too, because it's not this part of the hand.
Yeah,
it's actually in between the bars.
Yeah. And with pada, the blade is slightly higher up, so it is more aligned with these knuckles.
Okay.
But that's just purely because of how it's constructed. It's not a functional difference, really.
Nice. On to this.
And again, just like how these longer ones, you could in theory do more blade work. Obviously, the hood allows you
like hand protection.
Do more invasive techniques. So you were the one using this.
So what is it called?
I call it a pairing dastana. Dastana is the native term for bazuband.
Yeah. So this was pretty awesome. We messed around with it, and you can see it has these two bars in the back, So I was holding it and using it pretty much like a shield, like a sapar type of way. And every time you were using the pata when we did it, but mainly I was just catching it and like twisting and locking it. The multiple blades made catching the thing super easy. Pretty much like every time, like
you're
we
really good at
intentionally
that.
went to it, it caught it right away, and you just twisted your hand, and it locked the blade. I mean, it was super easy, and it was an awesome little fun thing to do
Yeah.
and use. What? When would they have used this though?
So this is also probably an invention of the Duckin. You know, like a number of these pieces are from. It's so India isn't like one of those regions of the world where there's a ton of books published really about arms development or anything like that. So I'm saying that to preface the fact that this is all just my personal like hypothesis
conjecture,
mixed with research and
experimental
stuff.
archaeology.
Yeah.
That's what we're going for.
Yeah, exactly. But so what I figured out is that based on some surviving older examples, this is a reproduction most likely. Or no, it is. I know that because I bought it. But there are some surviving examples from the 18th century, so before colonial times. So as much as this looks like just a fancy like kind of wall hanger type thing, we do have surviving examples. There are some where there's actual reinforcement like riveted here because presumably it was point like be bent.
Yeah.
But yeah, only what was it? Only a handful of them exist, and they're basically just as rare as like saber.
So I mean, it was awesome. Like another thing too, like in our chat, our private, like our Al-Asad chat, someone mentioned that it was used. These types of things were used for like hunting, like tigers or something. Do you think that's possible?
That's a common, basically a myth. There's no real like accounts of people doing this. It's commonly said specifically for just Qatars, and specifically even further in Rajasthan. You have these tales of Rajasthani princes like showing their bravery by going out and hunting a tiger with their Qatar. And like I was telling Issa, like sure you could do that. You could do that with a card, with anything.
Yeah.
But the tiger would also probably have your head in its mouth by the time you punch it. So like, I guess you can punch one with it, but I don't know about like bringing one down and surviving.
Yeah, that's true. Yeah, I guess that's when it leads to the epic hero level.
I'm just a bit more cynical about that. I mean, in theory, sure, but you might also need to bring a matchlock along or something,
or like your entourage that all have like the spears with you. Or
which is more common. There are countless miniatures of all these different princes going on hunting parties. And it's a party. There's a big group of people. So.
Yeah, that's awesome too.
One of them could like subdue a tiger and then you finish it off. But the idea of you like doing this by yourself, especially if you're a prince, because you're valuable.
So we have some.
We have a selection of tulwars. This one is the oldest. It has a Wootz blade on it, which it's not going to show up on camera. But I can send you some photos of that. This is a Bijapuri hilt, or at least that's what the research I've done leans towards. Bijapur is it's in the Deccan. It's one of the major regions, major kingdoms that existed there during the time of the Deccan Sultanates. And they're quite known for this very sort of elaborate style of engraving. They also produce tilts like this, much more elaborate and larger. And this is, if anything, a better example of Bijapuri work because they're really known for all these perforations and holes and stuff, and all of the floral decoration that's on here. And these actually both have Wootz blades. This one is a 19th century blade. This is wholly like 18th century or even 17th technically, as possible, like late 17th. This is a reproduction, so it's like 20th century probably in terms of dating. This one's also like really well balanced. Somewhat unusual is that the blade is a bit forward set.
Oh yeah.
But I mean, I don't think that really affected the handling or anything. It's got like a rivet with a white metal washer on either side. I mean, overall, it's just a good handle.
Yeah,
it's got
this one I thought this one. was nice too.
Yeah.
It felt really good. I think it actually maybe like fit my hand a little.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, you're able to hold most of the toe bars. I don't know about comfortably.
Yeah. It's just like my pinky knuckle hits.
Yeah, some of
That's
the knuckle bows can be kind of tight.
So maybe if I don't know if that would be safe. I bruised my pinky in a battle, but
Well,
this
usually
one's really nice.
the index finger.
Yeah.
Actually, but
And you can see the pattern if you're actually looking at it. On the blade, You don't know the name of the pattern by any chance?
So to my knowledge, there aren't any surviving like Hindustani names for which patterns or anything. It's more of a Persian thing.
Oh, nice.
At least based on the surviving like resources that we have, it's only the Persians that at least wrote about.
Oh, wow.
Or gave
That's
names.
Good. Yeah.
And yeah, like after the 17th or 18th century, boots stopped being produced in like really large quantities and really like artistic, like Indian roots, which is what the blade's made out of. Indian roots, from my like research, from what I've seen, is like really distinct in that it's a really fine pattern. So it's a lot of like broken up segments and stuff, and like really tiny concentrated rolls. Whereas Persian roots is like really, water like, really visible.
Yeah. Then there's the other two.
Yeah, so these two, they're almost identical in that the blades are like basically the same length, the same style of fullers. There's a wide one and then a small one. The hilts too, they're both, so these are North Indian compared to the rest of the more South and Central Indian examples. These are both like Punjabi, I think. And they both date to like late 18th or late 19th century. So the Sikh Empire was able to stay independent, like up until close, I think it was, to the middle of the 19th century. And so they're like one of the few 19th century weapon producers that did make really sort of battle-ready stuff. But these are, as you can see, they're pretty like undecorated.
Yeah, they are, but they also have like fullers, and the blades are thicker. So there is like a little difference in the style.
Yeah, it's a bit more European influence. The more sort of native style is like a flat kind of slab blade, almost champion. But I mean, that's just, I just like these guys because they're both quite similar and no nonsense sort of examples.
So we were doing some sparring and messing around with them, and maybe talk about how you think or how you read about keeping your like arm in this locked position when you're like swinging.
Yeah. So there's some of the stuff I got actually from just a YouTube channel. Their current name is just Akara, which is a native term for a martial arts school. But they're actually based in Russia, and the story is it's this one Russian martial artist who really likes India, and he traveled there and found a teacher who taught like a relatively practical version. Unfortunately, due to colonialism, most modern Indian martial arts are like all based around like festival performances, and they're usually choreography based instead of based on like free form like sparring and stuff. But he was able to find like a teacher that taught like actual martial arts technically. And so one of the things that he emphasizes in the videos he publishes is that you keep not only the wrist locked, so this is more or less a 90-degree angle, but you also keep the elbow locked as much as possible. And what we were finding is that this basically always like allows you to strike in just an arc. That doesn't like expand, it doesn't cast out or widen. It just stays really tight. And that encourages the draw cutting.
It seemed very like natural. Your body mechanics always made the draw cut. And it also then a concept that like we had always thought that the measure, like the distance between the two people fighting, has to then be like closer. And that allows you to do these full draw cuts and a much dynamic type of style, or dynamic looking anyway. Type of fighting, and it worked, and it also matches with the way the hilt and the pommel is designed. Because it makes it difficult for your fist to kind of go like this. So you kind of have to have it locked always in this position.
I mean, for the record, with any tulwar you can totally like move
Yeah,
the wrist.
yeah.
Like it doesn't prevent it.
Yeah,
It's just slightly uncomfortable.
yeah,
But yeah, and going back into medieval times, they obviously didn't have hilts like this, but there was still just as much of a prominent
yeah.
pommel plate was really what their examples were. So this style of not using your wrist just is ancient, pretty much in India.
Yeah, and it makes sense. And also, like, using meals, which I started to do, and which would go into like Indian clubs as well.
Yeah,
It is that motion, that's the motion that you train to use. And an idea too that I've been having is that if this was the methods of training, then wouldn't that incorporate into the actual sword striking? So that's kind of a direction that I'm going in, and now Elliot's with us. He lives in Minneapolis here, so it's pretty nice.
fire club.
Yeah. So, hopefully we'll going down this rabbit hole. Frank's into it too. We're going to just go this direction for a bit and try to push all this stuff together and figure out some stuff.
Yeah, it'll be pretty cool. Speedrun the rest. So, a couple more swords. So this is another 19th century sword from Rajasthan. So we sort of have the northern section over here. And this is a archetypical Sirohi. This is what you'll hear about Sirohis as being like really good swords, really high quality. This is like an example of that. A lot of modern collectors and like antique dealers like to sort of extrapolate the term Sirohi to refer to any just mildly curved tulwar. But the truth is that no, Sirohi is an actual place, and they were known for making an actual distinct style of sword, which was this. And this one is sharp, so he didn't use it to like spar or anything. They're also quite characteristic for having this Rajasthani style of hilt. You'll hear it attributed to like Udaipur and all these other cities, but it generally looks like this. It has a really wide, flat disc that encourages the kind of draw cutting. Is there anything you want to say?
No, this one, just mainly like the disc. When you compare it to the other ones, it does more keep your fist locked. And you can obviously like go like this, but you can see it like digs into the pad of your hand there, I guess. But this is an awesome sword too. It actually fits my hand.
Hey, there you go.
Yeah, and it is pretty awesome. It's interesting to see how these like spread apart.
Oh yeah, they can get bent relatively easily. Of course. But they're sort of like an external, habaki or something like that. Where the idea is they just fit around the scabbard. They don't. You can't really carry with them. If you did, they probably would bend.
That's what I thought too. Because on my Shamshir, the one is bent. And I don't know if I don't ever catch swords there, but I did let someone use my sword in a tournament, and I'm wondering if he like caught it. You know?
Yeah, you find them like bent inwards just as much as bent outwards. The last one they're kind of put to the side here. This is like an 18th century, again, Bijapuri style hilt. The blade, though, is 19th century roots, which was still made in India. It just wasn't as refined. That one has like a definite pattern. This one, on the other hand, is more what's known as dendritic roots, which, unlike Persian root styles or again Indian roots, it's not a definite like size or sort of shape or collection of shapes. Dendritic roots is basically just random. It's like there's some small segments, some large ones, there's some whorls, things like that. It's still definitely pretty, but it's just it's a 19th century kind of thing. And this is a sort of cavalry type hilt. You find these in both like Central Indian and Northern Indian styles. This is again more like